So, The Living Daylights review happening during evening lights. Okay, that wasn't a good connection. That wasn't a good pun, sort of whatever. But I had to try, right? So yeah, right now, Living Daylights was the first James Bond film that starred Timothy Dalton and came out in 1987. What people forget about the Timothy Dalton era was he only did two films. He did this one in 1987. He did License to Kill 2 years later, and then there was a dry spell for quite a few years before Pierce Brosnan took over. And with The Living Daylights, like, I understand the people that don't really care for it, but I also understand people that are fond of this. The James Bond films had been going at this point in 1987. The James Bond films had been going pretty hot for 25 years. It started in 1962 with Dr. No and Sean Connery, and by the time Connery finished his films, and by the time Roger Moore finished, even if you don't count the George Lazenby and the David Niven spoof, eventually, by 1987, there had been so many Bond films, and not just James Bond. There had been the Mission Impossible show. There had been the Italian Job. There had been Get Smart. There had been the Pink Panther. So, because there was so many different things happening, and things just got very repetitive. And Roger Moore had been James Bond for many different films. That was the era, at least in my own opinion, the Roger Moore era was the biggest hit and miss era for me. Because Sean Connery was rough, he was vicious, but he also had that sex appeal where he could score any hot girl that he wanted. But with Roger Moore, I thought that he didn't really have that sort of hard edge that Timothy Dalton or Sean Connery or any of the other ones had. His films most of his films were a little too prissy, a little too prim and proper, a little too fun and enjoyable. Again, espionage films are supposed to be fun, but most of the Moore films really lack that hard edge. And also, when Roger Moore was Bond, he became Bond around the time that the new wave of American cinema was really exploding with things. And all the Bond films were so tame and they really weren't pushing the envelope like they really needed to. But with Timothy Dalton, on the other hand, don't get me wrong, there's a few Roger Moore films where they were really hard boiled, but with Timothy Dalton, he has that really bone structure and those hard eyes that really possess that really badass quality that Ian Fleming had originally wanted in the books. Apparently, I haven't read any of Ian Fleming's Bond books, but I've read into that Bond was supposed to have been this hard-nosed, rough-and-tumble sort of secret agent. And now that there's finally somebody who can match Sean Connery's hard-edged exterior, I was happy about that. So, yeah, Living Daylights, as I said, came out in 1987, and it deals with the KGB and double-crossing and betrayal and, who's working for the Russians and stuff. Because the movie was in 1987, that was around the time that the Cold War was fading away. The Cold War was probably finished by then, because people like to say Rocky V was what ended the Cold War. So yeah, 2 years later, the Living Daylights comes out, and it was still the era of Cold War in Hollywood and pop culture. And given a typical Bond film, it does possess one that it's kind of a run-of-the-mill storyline, but kind of not. And I do think that if you were to see it more than once, just to really soak it up, because let's face it, a typical Bond film with so many subplots and so many tropes and all that kind of stuff happening to it, you're not going to be able to remember all that after the viewing finishes. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying you may need to watch a few times. But, in all honesty, last time I saw Living Daylights was quite a while ago. I was on a big James Bond, it was almost a binge, like a couple weeks of a binge. And so, of course, I found some things to be very, very repetitive. But right now, I haven't seen a Bond film in quite a while. It was Goldeneye was last, or From Russia with Love. One of them two was last film that I saw of James Bond. It's quite a while ago. I'm on vacation right now, so my mind is at a whole bunch of different places. So maybe it was just the product of the environment where I was at. But yeah, Living Daylights from 1987 is a good Bond film. I do like Timothy Dalton. If you don't like it, I totally understand exactly where you're coming from, but understand where I'm coming from too, okay? I'll give The Living Daylights from 1987 3 stars out of 4.